Hey, how's it going? Ben here. Great to see you. Thanks for tuning in. In this video, we're going to look at my 5 top performing images on stock photography websites. I wanted to show you my top performing stock photography images to show you what works well for me. I also wanted to have a look and see if we can discover or learn some things that make a profitable stock photograph. I've been uploading images to stock photography websites for around 2 years now. And I upload to 3 different websites. So I use Shutterstock, Alamy, and Adobe Stock. So they're the 3 that I've been uploading to. Without further ado, let's look at some images. So we're going to start with number 5. We're going to look at my 5th best performing image first and then work our way up to the best. So stay tuned to the end of the video to see my number 1, my top performing image on stock photography websites. This image is my 5th best performing image on stock photography websites. I titled this image London, a Pigeon's View, and this image has earned me a total of $1.38. This image was taken of a pigeon looking out on the landscape of London, who turned his head slightly when I was taking the image, and it made quite an interesting focal point for the image. I think the pigeon kind of looks like he's looking back at me taking the picture, which I think is pretty cool. The focal point is on the bird, so the image is focused on the bird, not on the landscape. So the landscape, the cityscape of London is actually blurred out in the background, so you can't see clearly the landscape of London. You can still make out some of the more famous landmarks. For example, you can still see the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral, and you can also make out the Millennium Bridge running across the River Thames. The story behind this image was I was in London and it was around the time of the Olympics. So I can remember what date this image was taken on. It was quite a while back actually, because the London Olympics was in 2012, if I'm remembering correctly. And I did go to one of the Olympic events, and while I was down there, I also went to a Damien Hirst art exhibition at the Tate Modern Gallery in London. And this is where that image was taken. I'm a big fan of Damien Hirst artwork. You can actually see one of his works in this picture. If you look to the right of the bird, there's a statue stood out front of the gallery. That is a Damien Hirst statue that was welcoming guests to the gallery. It's the back of the statue, and it's also blurry because it's not in focus. So you can't see it too well, but that is a Damien Hirst statue in this image. While I was in the gallery, I'd stopped at the cafe, and if I remember correctly, the cafe had a balcony. So the building's quite tall, and there was a balcony with seats to eat your lunch, and on the corner of the balcony at the bottom or on one of the rails was a pigeon. And I was out there taking pictures of the landscape. I thought it was an interesting viewpoint, and I found this image. I thought it'd be interesting to get the pigeon and in the foreground and the cityscape in the background, and that's what I did. So that's why I focused on the pigeon. It's been done intentionally, I promise. So yeah, the focus on the bird, I think, is what makes this image stand out, because typically, a cityscape would have the buildings in focus, not a pigeon. But I really like this image. I'm happy that it's done reasonably well on stock photography websites and earned me a little bit of money. If we're looking for reasons why this image would have been downloaded, I imagine predominantly it's because of the location. When it comes to cityscapes, locations seem to be key. And London is one of the most famous cities in the world. So I'm sure there are plenty of people who are going to the stock photography websites and searching London cityscape, London landscape. I imagine those type of images are in high demand. This isn't the best image to show that. Maybe a really clean cut image from this location with the famous landmarks in full focus would do better. I don't know. But I think this image may stand out. I'm sure there are already a lot of very good images of London and the landscape, especially this area. This is a very famous area. So the fact that the pigeon is blurred out, the fact that the landscape is blurred out and the pigeon is in focus, may be why this image stands out and has gained a few downloads. So yeah, this is my 5th best performing image, and I really like this image. Number 4. This is my 4th best performing image on stock photography websites. So this is a cityscape of Manchester. There's a ship canal, and it's a panorama. So I actually stitched a few different images together to make this shot. This image has earned me a total of $1.61 on stock photography websites. This is one of my favorite images that I've taken. Picturing the city that I lived in growing up, I love that if you split the image into layers, you get the cityscape built on top of the ship canal. The ship canal being one of the driving forces behind the explosion of the Industrial Revolution. A very significant event for the city. Manchester was very much the engine room of the Industrial Revolution in Britain, and the ship canal enabled shipping, so they were able to connect more easily, more directly with different countries around the world for that what was being produced in Manchester at the time. And so that's the bottom layer of the image, so everything's built on that, and that's kind of interestingly symbolic for me. I quite like that about this image. You can split this image into more layers, and you can further split it into layers. When you look at the lines of the buildings, if you look, the bottom half of the buildings are predominantly red brick. Those red bricks are very reminiscent of the factories of the Industrial Revolution. The red brick, I believe, being called the Salford red brick, which is a locally produced red brick that lots of the factories and mills were built from. And if you look at the line of the cityscape, the line of the buildings, the bottom half are the kind of red, older built buildings, and on top of them are glass and steel structures or towers reaching up to the sky. So you can see the more modern layer of buildings and the more historical layer of buildings in the Manchester landscape, which I think is really cool and really interesting. It shows the different eras of the city. So for personal reasons, this is a favorite image of mine. I think it's quite well composed. This is a city where I grew up. I grew up and lived in Greater Manchester for most of my life. And I think it's a pretty well taken image. There's a lot of detail. It's very high res because I stitched multiple images together. So I think that adds to it. If we're looking for reasons as to why this image might have been downloaded, the main reason I think is because of the location. Unfortunately, Manchester is a kind of renowned, well-known city. I'm sure there are plenty of people who are searching on stock sites, Manchester, cityscape, landscape, looking for images of the city. And what this image does well is kind of different to the last image we looked at. This is a very clear image of the architecture, very clear image of the city itself. And I think it would be used for a lot of different purposes, and specifically for people looking for, maybe they're writing blogs about the area, maybe there's a news story about the area. So anyone who searched in Manchester will hopefully see this image and hopefully think it's a decent image, and maybe they'll download it. So I think the location is why this image has done relatively well on stock photography websites. Number 3 is this image of a lighthouse in New Brighton. And this image has earned me $1.80. This image is relatively minimal and clean. I would assume that this image has been reasonably successful because of its simplicity. So the simple reason that some people probably may need an image of a lighthouse, and here is an image of a lighthouse. So yeah, this is an object or a thing that people may have searched for on stock photography websites. It's quite simple, it's quite clean, there's not a lot going on. It's basically just a lighthouse, and I think that may be why it's been downloaded. So if we dig a little bit deeper into some of the reasons why this image may have been downloaded, I would probably point to the composition. So the composition of this image is simple but quite effective. The horizon line runs along the image roughly at the lower third. So if we're going by the rule of thirds for photography, the horizon line in this image is roughly at the lower third of the image. Also, the lighthouse itself actually pretty much exactly sits on one of the lines of third as well. So if we're doing them vertically, so the horizon line is horizontally on one of the lines of thirds, and the lighthouse also stands vertically on one of the lines of thirds. So if we overlay a rule of thirds grid onto this image to show you what I'm talking about, you can see roughly the lighthouse sits on a vertical line of third, and the horizon line sits roughly on a line of third, although it's not as exact as the lighthouse. These basic fundamentals of photography help to make an image more pleasing to the eye of the viewer. So this is something to bear in mind when you're taking pictures for stock photography website, is not to forget the fundamentals of composition, because I imagine if you make an image that is quite relatively pleasing to the eye, that will help you get more downloads, as it will attract more viewers and more potential buyers. Also, with this image, you get a quite bright and punchy image. What I mean by that is the sky is a real royal blue, and the sea is an even darker, deeper blue. And then the lighthouse is a very bright, flat white, and that really jumps out from the dark, deep blues of the background. So there's a interesting effect that's happening, that's bringing the lighthouse really forward as it's being pushed forward by the deep blues of the background. For me, this image screams British seaside holiday. The deep blue skies and the quintessential lighthouse really makes that sort of holiday in the UK feel from the image, which is maybe another reason why this image has been downloaded. I can imagine people searching for lighthouse, finding this image, and potentially downloading also maybe like British seaside, looking for like holiday photos that sum up the sort of typical British seaside sort of image. Number 2 is this image. So this is Media City, an area, a very famous area in Manchester. And this image has earned me a total of $4.37. This image is my second best performing image on stock photography websites. So this shot is a photograph taken at Media City in Manchester. So if you look on the left, there's a very interesting and unique looking building on the left, and that is the Imperial War Museum. On the right, just coming into the image, is a section, it's not the full, there's a section of the BBC building, so another very famous building. And in the distance, just behind, on the opposite side of the water to the BBC, is the unbuilt ITV building. So 2 broadcasting stations now have buildings at Media City. That's why the area gets the name Media City. So there's lots of interesting organizations, well-known organizations and corporations operating in this area of Manchester. And there's been a ton of development there. So this is a section of the ship canal that's been cut off from the rest. So the water's maintained, it looks very clean. There's very modern and futuristic architecture and experimental and artistic architecture all around this area. And there's the biggest broadcasters also have buildings where they film, do other stuff in them, I imagine, there, such as the BBC and ITV. So looking for potential reasons why this image has performed so well for me. And it's quite a significant amount more than the previous image that this image has earned, so it's worthwhile investigating some ideas. So as I mentioned, the location is pretty significant. So again, it's in Manchester, which is a renowned, well-known city, lots going on there, very highly populated city. So there will be searches for Manchester, and this image may come up there. But to go a little bit deeper and specifically, so it's not just an image of Manchester, this is a bit of a niche down image. So this is Media City, an area in Manchester. And why would people be looking for Media City? Well, like I mentioned, there's big organizations, there's art galleries here, there's a war museum here, there's a outlet mall, there's recording studios and offices for the BBC, the biggest broadcasting company in Britain. And ITV, probably the second or third biggest broadcasting company in Britain. So there's lots of different well-known organizations that people may be searching for. So they may be searching for Manchester, Media City, the Ship Canal. Maybe they're looking for the BBC or the Imperial War Museum or ITV. So there's a lot going on in this image. There are lots of things that people may be potentially searching for on stock photography websites that may bring them to this image, which I think is probably key. The most striking feature of this image is the lighting. So this image was taken at dusk, just around sunset, and you can see in the sky that this time of day has really helped this image stand out. The color in the sky, I was lucky to be blessed by a beautiful sunset, so we have great pinks and reds and oranges that fill the sky and also are reflected in the glass buildings, on the metals of the buildings, and in the handrail in the foreground. And speaking of the handrail, it's also important to mention, I think, looking at this image, there's quite an interesting composition. So we spoke about the rules of thirds before, so there's a little bit of that going on in this image, in the layers. But uniquely to this image, we have kind of a guiding line that starts and runs diagonally through this image, and there's the handrail in the bottom right corner that then takes you up and across and around the image, and this kind of guides your eye when you're looking at this image and leads you around the image, which is a pretty interesting factor of this image and may aid its success. Also reflected in that handrail is an interesting reflection. You get this real abstract pattern of light from the sunset and color from the sunset and shapes from the building. So you get this interesting pattern on that leading line that draws the viewer's eyes in and around the image. Let's have a look at my best performing image on stock photography websites. This is the image. This is my best performing image on stock photography websites. This is a panorama shot taken at Media City, same location as the previous image. And this image has earned me $13.53, a much higher rate of income than all of the other images, maybe even all of the other images combined, I think so. So this is by far and away the top performing image for me on stock photography websites. So yeah, this image, once again, on the left you can see the Imperial War Museum and a bridge leaving over the ship canal. Let's analyze this picture and look for some reasons why it may be performing so well. So first of all, I would mention the architecture included in this image. So we've got the Imperial War Museum on the left and a very modern bridge. So I imagine it's a very modern and futuristic looking cityscape. That may be one of the reasons why it's been downloaded so much. The location, once again, is well known. We spoke about that a little bit more. So it's in a renowned city of Manchester. It's Media City. So these are all searchable terms people may have been looking for. There's a famous organization, the Imperial War Museum, and we have the bridge. Maybe that was something people were looking for. We also have a very clear reflection line in the ship canal, so you get a beautiful reflection of the building and the bridge. Again, makes it almost look like a spaceship or something very futuristic, and I think they may be some of the reasons why this image has done so well. Once again, the lighting in this image is probably key to its success. So as I mentioned, this is the same location as the previous image. It was actually taken on the same day, so it was in a trip out to Media City where I was taking a bunch of these images, and I was blessed with a beautiful sunset. So we have the oranges and the reds and the sky. The light's beautifully diffused as it's lower in the sky, as that is what happens if you shoot in the golden hour. So that would be the time at dawn or dusk. This is well known in photography. So yeah, we're blessed with the sky, and it's actually split almost perfectly down the middle. So if you look at a line in the center of this image, on one side you have these oranges and red and white sky, and on the other side, on the left of this image, you have a deep blue sky. So I really like the way it's been divided up, and there's a ton of color in the sky, and it's all reflected in the water below. Those are the reasons why I think this image has done so well. Let me know in the comment section what you think. What would your opinion be of this image, and why do you think it's done so well on the stock photography websites? Because I do think it's an interesting image, but I have a few images like this, so I'm not entirely sure specifically what it is about this image that has been made it the by far and out highest performer. Those are my 5 top performing images on stock photography websites. And what conclusions can we draw from these images? The first thing I noticed when looking at all of these images, one thing that's consistent across all of them is that each contains a large body of water. I'm not sure if this is purely coincidence, but maybe not. Maybe there's something to this. I don't know. But yeah, if we look at the images, we have the first image, obviously the best performing one, we have the Manchester Ship Canal, and the second one we have the Manchester Ship Canal. In the third one of the Lighthouse, we have the ocean, large, and this is probably the largest body of water in all of the images. And the fourth one we have the Manchester Ship Canal, so all the images of Manchester feature the Manchester Ship Canal. Even in the image of London, although it's not as clear, not as visible, you do have the River Thames running through and splitting the landscape of London in this image. So potentially that's something to bear in mind. Maybe water really does sell, or maybe it's just quite pleasing aesthetically. It makes the image more interesting when there's a large body of water in the image. Certainly seems that it's had some kind of effect on my images. Maybe my images predominantly have a large body of water in. That's something I'll have to look into, but it's something quite quirky I noticed about all these images that I wasn't quite expecting. The next significant point I take from these images is that the best performing images, or not all of them, but a large portion of them, were taken in very well-known, renowned cities. So I guess location is everything. So if we think about it, we had 3 images in Manchester, 1 image in London. So 4 out of 5 of my images were in world-renowned cities. These 2 cities are the biggest cities in England, and that probably holds some weight. I think the amount of searches for London and Manchester will be massive compared to lots of other cities or areas. So that may be something to bear in mind. Look for locations that are well-renowned or have a type of culture, or that are just very popular places that people may be searching for and need images of. Next, let's talk about lighting. So my top 2 performing images, the cityscapes at Media City in Manchester, both had a quite striking sunset in the image. So it's called the golden hour for a reason. You know, photographers do use that phrase a lot. So the hours around dusk and the hours around dawn in the morning, dusk and dawn. At that time, what happens is the light gets diffused more across the sky as the sun is lower and further away. And also, if you're lucky to get a sunset or a sunrise, you may get an injection of vibrant, different colors in the sky and reflected on the buildings or on the subject that you're shooting. If you're shooting outdoors, it's definitely worth planning the time of day that you'll be there on location taking the images, because it can have a massive effect on the outcome of your image. My final thoughts on stock photography and taking images that will be profitable on stock photography websites is remember the basics of photography. So lots of these images, we talked about lighting already, location, focus, and composition. So another key was composition. For me, the images that performed best had an interesting or a pleasing composition, and they followed things like the rules of thirds, or they had leading lines that were diagonally taking your eye around the image. So my final point is, don't forget the basics of photography if you're lucky enough to have learnt them. If you're not familiar with those basics, then maybe take some course or just look on YouTube. There's tons of people talking about the basics and foundations of photography to remember when you're taking images. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and I hope you found it useful. I'd love to hear what type of images perform well for you on stock photography websites, so let me know in the comment section what photos perform well for you. If there's any points I've missed while talking about these images, I would love to get your opinions and feedback on that. If you enjoyed watching this video, please hit the like button. If you found this video useful, please consider subscribing, because I do talk about stock photography a lot on this channel. So if you're into that, then maybe it's worth you subscribing, and we can continue the dialogue of stock photography website on this channel. Until next time, see you later.